modern vampires in the city. Um, Vampire Weekend has this song called Yahey, very clearly a reference to Yahweh, very religious. And it's a fascinating song because it really seems to be this kind of letter that is written to God, to tell God that nobody really cares about him anymore. Nobody thinks about God. Um, it's kind of like a breakup letter of some sort, or you could almost see it as a letter of lament as well. As I think about the song "Unbelievers," that's at the beginning of the record, there seems to be a little bit of lament that we can't believe in this kind of transcendence anymore. That they wish there was a God out there, but they're just not convinced that there is. And so the lyrics of the song are quite fascinating. So it starts out, "Oh, sweet thing, Zion doesn't love you, and Babylon don't love you, but you love everything. Oh, you saint, America don't love you. So I could never love you in spite of everything. In the dark of this place, there's the glow of your face. There's the dust on the screen of this broken machine, and I can't help but feel that I've made some mistakes, but I let it go. Yahey. Through the fire and through the flames, you won't even say your name. Through the fire and through the flames, you won't even say your name. Only I am that I am, but who could ever live that way?" So again, a very clear reference to Moses and the burning bush, where the name of God is given. And here they're kind of saying, like, you wouldn't even tell us your name. Who can live like that? And then later on, there's the fascinating lyric that says, "Oh, the motherland don't love you, the fatherland don't love you, so why love anything? Oh, good God, the faithless, they don't love you, the zealous hearts don't love you." And that's not going to change. Basically, some people have moved on. They don't believe in religion anymore. But even the people who believe in religion, it seems like they're saying that they don't really love you. They're kind of doing this out of duty or ritual or something else. And so again, I think that this is a powerful song that I believe speaks to the heart of what the Old Testament is really about. There's an author, Walter Brueggemann. He wrote a book called The Prophetic Imagination. And in this book, he talks about these two strains, that you'll get this kind of what he refers to as the royal consciousness strain. And this is all about kind of power and kingship and monarchy. And so the person who represents the royal consciousness is Solomon. And so if you know the story of Solomon, you know that he built palaces and armies and power and wealth and so on. And Brueggemann's argument is that Solomon really isn't a good guy, and represents this kind of royal consciousness where God is simply a guarantee of the status quo. That God needs to be in this temple, God needs to be contained in this building, so that God can have a place, so we can kind of make sure that we kind of keep God under control. But then he refers to the prophetic imagination, and this is the prophetic community of Moses, of Jeremiah, and ultimately of Jesus. And he talks about that at certain points in the book. And what he's doing, what Brueggemann wants to say, is that the Old Testament writings are actually this tension and struggle between the royal consciousness and the prophetic community and the prophetic imagination. And that the true revelation of God is the revelation of this God of covenant, this God who loves, who enters into relationship, this God who grieves, who weeps over humanity that has abandoned him, of Israel who has not been faithful. We see this play out in the prophet Jeremiah, who basically sets up the relationship between God and the people of Israel as a marriage, and that Israel's been unfaithful. And here's what you hear in Jeremiah chapter 2. It says, "Hear the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, what wrong did your ancestors find in me, that they went far from me, and went after worthless things, and became worthless themselves? They did not say, where is the Lord who brought us up from the land of Egypt, who led us in the wilderness, in the land of deserts and pits, in a land of drought and deep darkness, in a land that no one passes through, where no one lives? I brought you into a plentiful land to eat its fruits and its good things. But when you entered, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. The priests did not say, 'Where is the Lord?' Those who handled the law did not know me. The rulers transgressed against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after things that do not profit." And so you get this idea here that the Lord grieves the fact that his people want nothing to do with him, that he has been faithful to them and they have gone chasing after other gods. You get this in chapter 3 of Jeremiah. If a man divorces his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her? Would not such a land be greatly polluted? You have played the whore with many lovers, and would you return to me, says the Lord? What Brueggemann does is he differentiates between the royal consciousness of Solomon and Egypt and the powers, and the prophetic community of Moses and Jeremiah and eventually Jesus. So here's how he summarizes the royal consciousness. He says, the royal program of achievable satiation is fed by a management mentality, which believes there are no mysteries to honor, only problems to be solved. This, the Solomonic evidence urges, was not a time of great leadership, heroic battles, or bold initiatives. It was a time governed by the cost accounting of a management mentality. It is legitimated by an official religion of optimism, which believes God has no business other than to maintain our standard of living, ensuring his own place in his palace. That requires the annulment of the neighbor as a life giver in our history. It imagines that we can live outside of history as self-made men and women. So the royal consciousness is really an approach to God that is religion, focused on power, status, maintaining the status quo, maintaining our position in society, and really relegating God to a place, a building, like turning God into a lucky rabbit's foot that we keep around because we want to cover our bases, but really we're putting our trust in our own strength and in our own might. Later, Brueggemann talks about the prophetic community. He quotes from Jeremiah, "Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he my darling child? For as often as I speak against him, I do remember him still." Here's what Brueggemann writes, "Yahweh himself is grieving and will not turn loose. The language permits the word of Jeremiah to transcend the person of the prophet. The grief will not be dismissed as the idiosyncrasy of Jeremiah, for it is nothing less than God's grief over his dead child. Jeremiah has pressed where his contemporaries would not readily go, to the pain of God, to a place where only Hosea has ventured to go. Yahweh is no longer an enemy who must punish or destroy, but the helpless parent who must stand alongside death, like Mary at Calvary, like David over Absalom. My child, but he's helpless and can only grieve." What Brueggemann is getting at in the prophetic imagination is that the God of the Old Testament is a God who covenants, who makes promises, a God who is faithful, a God who enters into the life of the people with whom he makes covenant, a God who grieves, and a God who enters into the suffering and even death of the people with whom he covenants. That as we see Israel be led off into exile, we can see that in a sense God goes with them and God goes into exile. And for Brueggemann, this pushes ahead to the cross, where from the cross, Jesus proclaims, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The sense of God entering into the suffering and the misery of God's people. And again, I think it's important to see the difference between this kind of emphasis on religion that focuses on power and might and wealth and prosperity, and much more, the Bible focuses on a God who grieves and who enters into the life of the people with whom God partners and God covenants. And to me, this is the gospel. And I think Vampire Weekend has kind of stumbled onto this kind of Old Testament idea, this wrestling that you see. It goes all the way back to Jacob wrestling with the angel, that Israel is constantly wrestling with God, that as they go into the wilderness, Moses is kind of wrestling with God. At least give me your name. Tell me who you are so I can go to the Israelites and tell them who is sending me. That Israel wrestles with God as God brings them through the wilderness. And the whole Old Testament story is this narrative of wrestling. And what a different picture that gives, I think, for us today. And I think the Christian community today has done something very similar. We want to keep God locked up in a box. We want God to be this almost token and totem of power and wealth and prosperity. We want this God to be a God that draws boundaries, clear boundaries between the in-group and the out-group. And yet, what Brueggemann forces us to do, and I think what Vampire Weekend forces us to do, is go back into the Old Testament and read about a God who loves, a God who creates, a God whose desire is to be with the people that God creates, and a God that enters into the suffering and misery, a God who grieves, and a God who longs to be with his people. This is the gospel. This is what is fulfilled in Jesus Christ on the cross with the proclamation, my God, why have you forsaken me?